"I have come," said Miss Jane Alcott, standing in the hall of Wexford Court, with a much-folded newspaper cutting in her gloved hand, "in answer to the advertisement, the one seeking a wife for the Duke of Wexford, and a mother for his little girl. I am aware it is unusual to answer such a thing in person, but the advertisement was so unusual itself, and so touching, that I could not simply write, and I have come a very long way, and I should like, if I may, to speak with whoever placed it." The Duke of Wexford, who had come down to his own hall to discover why a strange young woman was standing in it, went very still. "May I see that?" he said. Jane Alcott handed him the cutting, and the Duke of Wexford read, in the small print of a newspaper he had never authorized, the following, which he had most certainly never written: "Wanted, a wife for a duke, and more particular, a mother for a little girl aged 8 who has not got one, and would like one very much. The Duke is my papa. He is a very good papa, but he is sad and lonely since Mama died, and does not smile. And I think he needs a wife to make him smile again. And I need a mother, because a girl ought to have one. And nurse says I ought not to advertise, but I do not see how else papa is to get a wife, as he never goes anywhere, or meets anyone, and refuses every lady aunt sends. Wanted, therefore, a kind lady, not too proud, who likes little girls and does not mind a sad papa, to come and be our wife and mother. She should be warm, and should like books as papa does, and should not be after his money, as aunt says everyone is. Apply to Lady Beatrice Vane, aged 8, at Wexford Court. Papa does not know about this advertisement, so please do not tell him until the right lady comes." The Duke of Wexford read it twice, and then, very quietly, he sat down on the hall bench, because his 8-year-old daughter had, it appeared, advertised for a wife for him in a public newspaper, and he did not entirely know whether to laugh or to weep, and found, alarmingly, that he wanted to do both. "My daughter," he said at last, faintly, "placed this advertisement." "So it says," Jane agreed, with the ghost of a smile. "Lady Beatrice Vane, aged 8. And I will confess, your grace, for you are the Duke, I collect, the sad lonely papa in question. I will confess that of the 40 or 50 advertisements I have answered in my search for a new position, being a governess lately out of a place and rather desperate, this was the only one that made me laugh, and then made me cry, and then made me get on a coach and come 100 miles on the strength of it, which is a mad thing to have done, and I am fully aware of it. I did not come expecting to marry a duke. I am not such a fool as that. I came because a little girl wrote the most honest and most heartbreaking thing I have ever read in a newspaper. A child advertising for a mother because she has not got one and thinks her papa is sad. And I could not, having read it, simply go and answer some ordinary advertisement for a governess, and pretend I had not read it. I had to come and see. I had to know that the little girl who wrote this was all right, was being looked after, was loved, even if lonely. That is why I am here. Not for the wife of a duke part, which is absurd, but for the motherless little girl part, which is not absurd at all, and which I could not get out of my head." And the Duke of Wexford looked up from the advertisement at the young woman in the worn but neat governess's traveling clothes, who had come 100 miles not to catch a duke, but because a child's loneliness had reached out of a newspaper and caught her, and felt something move in him that had not moved since his wife died. "You came," he said slowly, "because of Beatrice, not because of me, or the dukedom, or the money. Because a lonely child wrote something sad, and you could not bear it, and you got on a coach, 100 miles, to make sure a little girl you had never met was all right." "Yes," Jane said simply. "I am a governess, your grace. Lonely children are my whole life's work and my whole life's love. Being rather a lonely person myself, with no children of my own, and none likely, and no family to speak of. When a lonely child cries out, even in a newspaper, even a child I have never met, I find I cannot not go. It is a great fault in me, my aunt always said, this inability to leave a sad child unattended. It has cost me sleep and coach fare and dignity more than once. But there it is. Your Beatrice cried out in a newspaper, and I heard it, and I came. And now that I am here, and have made a great fool of myself, and have discovered that the sad papa is a duke, and the whole thing is even more absurd than I feared, I find I still do not regret coming, because somewhere in this great house is a little girl who was lonely enough to advertise for a mother, and I should very much like, before I go, to meet her, and tell her that a lady did come, in answer to her advertisement, even if the lady is only a poor governess and not the duchess she was hoping for. May I? May I meet Beatrice? I have come 100 miles. I should hate to go back without at least telling her that her advertisement was heard. She met Beatrice, and it was the meeting that decided everything, though none of them knew it yet. The child was brought down, a grave, dark-eyed little girl, too solemn for 8, with the particular watchfulness of a child who has lost her mother and learned to worry about her surviving parent. And she was told that a lady had come in answer to her advertisement, and she looked at Jane Alcott with a mixture of hope and terror that broke Jane's heart clean in two. "You came," Beatrice whispered. "A lady came. I had almost given up. Nurse said no one would come, that it was a foolish thing to do, and Papa would be angry, and I have been so afraid he would find out and be angry. And no lady came, and I thought I had done it all wrong, and no one would ever come, and Papa would just go on being sad forever." Her small chin wobbled. Will you? I know I am not supposed to ask straight out. Nurse says it is not done, but I have been waiting so long. Will you be our mother? Will you make Papa smile? He has not smiled since Mama died. Not once, not really. And I do not remember what it looks like anymore. And I thought if I could just find him a wife who was warm and liked books, he might. Please, will you be our lady? You have a kind face. I read a great many advertisements before I wrote mine, and I know a kind face when will you stay? And Jane Alcott went down on her knees in the hall of Wexford Court, careless of her one good traveling dress, and took the anxious child's hands, and did not lie to her, because a child who has been brave enough to advertise for a mother deserves the truth. "I cannot promise to be your mother, sweetheart," she said gently, "because that is a very big thing, and it is not mine to promise. It belongs to your papa, and to time, and to a great many things a lady cannot decide by herself in a hallway. But I can promise you this, and I will keep it. I am not going to simply go away and leave you lonely. You wrote the bravest, truest advertisement I have ever read, and it reached 100 miles and brought me here, and I am not going to answer that kind of courage by vanishing. Whatever happens about mothers and wives and all the rest, those are grown-up questions, and they will sort themselves out or they will not. I will stay long enough to know you, and be your friend, and see that you are not lonely, and that is a promise I can make and mean. Right now, on my knees in your hall. You reached out, and someone came, and someone is staying. That much is true, whatever else turns out to be. You were not foolish to write it. You were brave, and brave is always heard, in the end, even from an 8-year-old, even in a newspaper, especially in a newspaper. And Beatrice Vane flung her arms around the neck of the governess who had come 100 miles because of her, and wept the relieved tears of a child whose desperate gamble has, against all hope, been answered. And the Duke of Wexford, watching from the hall doorway, watching a stranger kneel on his floor and gather his motherless daughter into her arms, and speak to her with more honest tenderness than the child had known in the 2 years since her mother died, felt the frozen grief he had carried since his wife's death crack straight down the middle. He asked Jane to stay. Of course he asked her to stay. Not as a wife, that was absurd. The whole advertisement was absurd. But as a governess, a real position. Because his daughter had bloomed in 10 minutes under this woman's attention in a way she had not bloomed in 2 years. And because he was not fool enough to send away the one person who had reached his grieving child. Jane accepted, for Beatrice's sake, she told herself, only for Beatrice's sake, and stayed, and became the governess at Wexford Court, and set about the work she was born for, which was the tending of a lonely child. For Jane Alcott had a particular understanding of lonely children, and it came from the hardest possible source, which was having been one. She had been orphaned young, both parents gone before she was 10, and passed from reluctant relation to reluctant relation, a burden nobody quite wanted, a child who learned early that she was tolerated rather than loved, that she must be useful and quiet, and take up as little room as possible, that no one was coming to make her lonely small life less lonely. and she had survived it, and grown up, and become a governess, because it was the only respectable trade open to a woman with an education and no fortune. But she had become, more than a governess, a kind of specialist in the exact loneliness she had suffered, because she recognized it instantly in the children she taught, the overlooked ones, the ones grieving or unwanted or passed over, and she could not, having been such a child, leave such a child unattended. It was why she had come 100 miles for Beatrice. It was why she came, in one way or another, for every lonely child she met. She was, she sometimes thought, still trying to rescue the lonely orphan she had been, one other lonely child at a time, giving to them the thing no one had given her, which was simply to be seen, and stayed with, and not left alone. So when she looked at Beatrice Vane, motherless, grieving, worrying about her sad papa, brave enough to advertise for a mother because no one else would give her one, Jane did not see merely a charge to be taught. She saw herself, aged 8, and she loved the child instantly and fiercely, with the particular love of one lonely orphan for another, and she resolved, that first day on her knees in the hall, that whatever became of the absurd business of wives and dukes, this child at least would not be left alone, as Jane had been left alone. "You are very good with her," the Duke observed, watching, some days into Jane's stay, watching his daughter follow the new governess about like a duckling, watching the child laugh in a way she had not laughed in 2 years. "I know exactly what she is feeling," Jane said simply, "because I felt it. I was an orphan, Your Grace. Both my parents dead before I was 10, and passed round the family after like an unwanted parcel, tolerated and never loved, always in someone's way. I know precisely what it is to be a lonely child in a house full of people, grieving alone, certain no one is coming. Beatrice is not an orphan. She has you, and you love her, which is more than I had. But she has been grieving her mother alone, and worrying about you alone, and feeling, in her way, unseen, and that particular loneliness I know from the inside, and cannot leave unattended. It is why I came. It is why I came for every lonely child I have ever taught. I suppose," she gave a small, rueful smile, "I suppose I am still, in a way, trying to comfort the lonely little girl I was, by comforting every lonely little girl I meet. It is not a very grand motive, but it is a true one, and it is why your daughter is safe with me, Your Grace, because I will never, ever leave her feeling as I was left. That much I can promise you, whatever else is uncertain." And the Duke of Wexford, hearing that the governess who had come for his daughter had been, herself, exactly the lonely unwanted child she now could not bear to leave unattended, felt his cold, grief-frozen heart move toward her in a way it had not moved toward anyone since his wife died. Because there is nothing so moving as a person who has taken their own deepest wound and made of it a gift for others. And Jane Alcott had taken the loneliness that had nearly broken her and turned it into the exact tenderness his motherless daughter most needed. He did not know, yet, that he was beginning to love her. But he knew that he did not want her ever to leave, and that the house was warmer with her in it, and that his daughter was healing under her hands. And those, though he could not yet name them, were the first stirrings of the smile his daughter had advertised to restore. But a governess who tends a widowed man's motherless child is a governess in more danger than she knows, because she cannot help but tend, a little, the widowed man as well, and the Duke of Wexford was, under his frozen grief, exactly the sad, lonely good papa his daughter's advertisement had described. And Jane Alcott, warm and honest and unable to leave any lonely creature unattended, found herself over the weeks, drawing the grave Duke out as gently as she drew out his daughter, until the three of them, without anyone quite intending it, had become something very like the family Beatrice had advertised for. The drawing out of the Duke happened by the same slow, patient means as the drawing out of his daughter, and Jane did it half without meaning to, simply by being warm in a cold house. She noticed, first, that the Duke never spoke of his late wife, that the house was full of a grief no one was permitted to mention, that Beatrice had learned not to speak of her mother because it made her papa go gray and silent, so that the child was grieving alone, and the father was grieving alone, and neither was allowed to grieve together, which struck Jane as the saddest arrangement she had ever encountered. And Jane, who understood grief and understood children, set about gently to change it, not by forcing the subject, but by making it safe, by mentioning the late Duchess herself, lightly, kindly, as a natural person who had existed and been loved, so that Beatrice learned it was allowed. And then the Duke, by slow degrees, learned it too. "Beatrice showed me the miniature of her mother today," Jane said to the Duke one evening, gently, in the library, in the gallery. "She wanted to tell me about her, that she had fair hair, and sang, and made up stories about the portraits. She has been longing to talk about her mother, Your Grace, and has had no one to talk to, because everyone in this house treats her mother as a thing that must not be mentioned, and so the child has been carrying her grief entirely alone, with no one to share the remembering. I hope you do not mind that I let her talk. I think it did her a great deal of good. A child ought to be allowed to remember her mother aloud, and to be sad, and to be comforted in the sadness, not to learn that her grief must be hidden because it distresses the grown-ups." And the Duke of Wexford was silent for a long moment, and then he said, in a voice gone rough, "I did not know she wanted to talk of Anne. I thought it kinder not to raise it, not to distress her. I see now that I was only sparing myself. I could not bear to speak of Anne, and so I made the whole house silent about her, and my daughter has been grieving her mother alone, because her father was too wounded to grieve with her. That is a terrible thing to have done to a child. I did not see it until you said it just now." "You did not do it from unkindness," Jane said. "You did it from your own grief, which is real, and which you have been carrying alone exactly as Beatrice has been carrying hers. That is the pity of it. You and your daughter, grieving the same woman, in the same house, each entirely alone, because neither of you could bear to raise it with the other, for fear of causing pain. But grief shared is grief halved, Your Grace, and grief hidden is grief doubled, and you have a daughter who needs to remember her mother with someone who loved her too, which is you, the only other person in the world who loved Anne as Beatrice did. You could grieve her together, the two of you. It would hurt, but it would hurt so much less than grieving her alone in separate rooms, which is what you have both been doing for 2 years." She hesitated, then added, gently, "Talk to your daughter about her mother, Julian. Let her show you the miniature. Let the two of you be sad together, and remember together, and cry together if you need to. It is the thing she most needs and cannot ask for, and it is, I think, the thing you most need too, though you have taught yourself not to know it." And the Duke of Wexford took Jane's advice, went, that very week, and sat with his daughter in the gallery before the miniature of her mother, and let the child tell him about the fair hair, and the singing, and the stories, and told her his own memories in return. And the two of them wept together for the first time in 2 years, and grieved the woman they had both been grieving alone, and it broke something loose in both of them, the shared grief, and began the true healing that had not been possible while each grieved in silence. And the Duke understood that Jane Alcott had given him back not only his daughter's smiles, but his own ability to mourn his wife, which he had frozen because he could not bear it alone, and that a woman who could do that, who could see the hidden grief in a house and gently make it safe to feel, was worth more than any duchess bred to the role, and was, in every way that mattered, exactly the mother his daughter had advertised for, and the wife his own frozen heart had needed. It was Beatrice, naturally, who said the thing aloud that the grown-ups were carefully not saying. "Papa smiled," the child announced at dinner one evening, with the devastating directness of the young, "at what Miss Alcott said about the horses. I saw it. A real one. The first real one since Mama." Miss Alcott made Papa smile, which is exactly what the advertisement was for. "So I do not see, Papa, why you do not simply marry her, as the advertisement plainly requested, since she is warm and likes books, and has made you smile, and is not after your money because I asked her, and she said she came for me, and not for the dukedom at all, which Aunt says is the only kind of lady worth having. So you should marry her. I have thought about it a great deal, and I do not understand what everyone is waiting for." And into the appalled silence that followed, Jane, scarlet, began to stammer something about children not understanding, and the Duke, also scarlet, began to say something repressive about advertisements and impertinence. and the two of them looked at each other across the table over the child's dark head, and stopped, because the child had said the exact truth, and they both knew it, and neither of them had the smallest idea what to do about it. It was the Duke who broke first, some nights later, because a man cannot have his daughter announce the truth at dinner and then go on pretending he has not heard it. He found Jane in the library. She had taken to reading there in the evenings, once Beatrice was abed, and he had taken to finding her there, on pretext that had grown thinner each night, and he shut the door, and stood a moment gathering himself, and then said the thing. "Beatrice was right," he said. "At dinner, that is the difficulty, Miss Alcott. She was entirely right, in her appalling 8-year-old way, and I have been unable to unhear it. You have made me smile, for the first time since my wife died. You have brought my daughter back to life. You have filled this cold house with something it has not had in 2 years, and I find I dread the day you decide your work here is done, and take another post, the way I have not dreaded anything since the grief itself. And I have been telling myself that these are the feelings of a grateful father toward an excellent governess, and nothing more. And Beatrice, who is 8 and does not know she is not supposed to say such things, looked at the pair of us across the dinner table and named it plainly, and I find I cannot pretend any more." He drew a breath. "I have come to care for you, Jane, more than a widower ought to care for his daughter's governess. And I do not know what to do about it, because you did not come here to be courted. You came for Beatrice. You have said so. You came 100 miles for a lonely child, and not for a duke. And it would be the worst kind of presumption for me to now, when you are under my roof, in my employ, dependent on my good will, to press feelings on you that you never invited, and may not return. So I am telling you plainly, rather than pressing, and leaving it entirely with you. I care for you. If that is unwelcome, say so, and I will never speak of it again, and you may stay as Beatrice's governess for as long as you wish, with nothing changed. But I could not go on pretending, after Beatrice named it, that there was nothing to name." And Jane Alcott set down her book, and was quiet for a long moment, and then she gave him the honesty that was the whole of her. "It is not unwelcome," she said. "I will not pretend it is, because you have been honest, and you deserve honesty. I have come to care for you too, for you and for Beatrice, and for the strange, warm family the three of us have somehow become, which I never sought, and cannot now imagine doing without. But your grace, I need you to understand my fear, because it is a real one, and it is not false modesty. I came here in answer to a child's advertisement for a wife for a duke. Think how that looks. Think how it will always look. If I marry you, the whole world will say, and I will always half fear it myself, that I answered an advertisement to catch a duke, that I came 100 miles hunting a title, that I wormed my way in as a governess, and schemed my way up to a duchess. I told your daughter I came for her, and not the dukedom, and it was true, but no one will believe it, because the plain facts are that a poor governess answered an advertisement for a duke's wife, and ended by marrying the duke, and that is the story of a fortune hunter. However pure my actual motives were, I could not bear it. I could not bear to have our marriage be, in the world's eyes, and in my own worst midnight fears, the successful scheme of a governess who advertised her way into a coronet. You deserve better than a wife the world calls an adventuress, and Beatrice deserves better than to grow up hearing that her advertisement was used by a scheming woman to trap her papa. So even though I care for you, even though nothing would make me happier than to be, truly, the mother Beatrice advertised for, I am afraid the very way I came makes it impossible, because it would taint the whole thing with exactly the appearance of scheming that I most abhor." The Duke of Wexford considered this, gravely, because it was a real difficulty, and he would not wave it away. "You are right that it is how it would look," he said, "to the world, and to your own fears. So let us look at it squarely, rather than pretending it away. The world will say a governess schemed her way to a coronet, and here is my answer to the world, and to your midnight fears. And it is the plain truth. You did not answer the advertisement. That is the thing everyone will forget, and we must remember. You did not write to me offering yourself as a wife. You came, 100 miles, at your own expense, ruining your search for an actual position, because a child's loneliness moved you, and your first act on arriving was to kneel on my floor and tell that child you could not promise to be her mother, that it was too big a thing to promise, and that you had come only to be sure she was all right. A fortune hunter does not do that. A fortune hunter presses her advantage, angles for the duke, plays the willing bride. You did the opposite. You disclaimed the wife part entirely and came only for the child. I watched you do it. Beatrice watched you do it. Half my household watched you do it. And that, the disclaiming, the coming for the child, not the duke, is the exact and permanent proof that you are no adventuress, and I will make certain the world hears it, loudly, as often as needed, that the governess who came in answer to my daughter's advertisement came for the child and refused, on her knees in my hall, to so much as promise the wife part, and married me, a year later, only after I had pursued her past all her reluctance. That is not the story of a fortune hunter. It is the story of a good woman who could not leave a lonely child unattended, and I will tell it that way until every soul in England has it straight. He crossed to her. And as for your own midnight fears, Jane, you will know, in your own heart, the truth that no gossip can touch, that you did not scheme for me, that you tried to disclaim me, that you came for Beatrice, and had to be talked into the rest. You will always know it, because it is true, and you were there, and so was I. Let the world say what it likes. We will know. Beatrice will know. And that is enough, more than enough, to build a marriage on. You would have to court me, Jane said unsteadily, wavering at last, properly, openly, so that it is plain to everyone, and to me, that you pursued me, that I did not pursue you, that the wife part was your doing and not mine. I will not have it any other way. If I am to overcome how it looks, then it must be beyond all doubt that you sought me, that I resisted, that the scheming, if anyone schemed, was entirely on your side and not on mine. I will court you, the Duke said, so openly and so persistently, over the objections of my whole family and the raised eyebrows of the entire county, that no one will ever be able to say anything but that the Duke of Wexford pursued his daughter's reluctant governess, shamelessly, until she consented. I will make my pursuit of you the most conspicuous thing in 3 counties. I will make it embarrassing. I will make it a matter of public record that I chased you and you fled. Will that do? Will that free you to have what I think we both want, which is to be, truly, the family Beatrice tried to advertise into being? And Jane Alcott, who had come 100 miles for a lonely child and found, against every intention, a whole family, let the last of her fear go, and smiled through the tears standing in her eyes. Yes, she said, if you court me so openly that no one can call me a schemer, then yes. Because I do want it, Julian. I want to be Beatrice's mother, and your wife, and the warm center of this cold house, more than I have ever wanted anything. I only could not bear for the wanting to look like scheming. Make it plain that you pursued me. Chase me embarrassingly, and I will let myself be caught, gladly, and be the lady the advertisement asked for, and make you smile for the rest of your life, exactly as your daughter ordered. Yes, and from the doorway, where she had been shamelessly eavesdropping, in her nightgown, long past her bedtime, came the triumphant voice of Lady Beatrice Vane, aged 8. I knew it. I knew the advertisement would work. Nurse said it wouldn't, and it did. I am going to have a mother, and Papa is going to smile, and it is all because of my advertisement. And I should like it very much if everyone would remember, always, that it was me who arranged it. And she flung herself across the library into the arms of both of them at once, and the Duke of Wexford gathered his daughter and his daughter's governess into his arms together, and smiled. A real one, the second Beatrice had seen since her mother died, and the first of thousands to come. They were married in the spring, and the Duke kept his promise. He courted Jane Alcott so openly, so persistently, so conspicuously over the winter, in the teeth of his astonished family and the raised eyebrows of the whole county, that no one who witnessed it could ever have called the governess a schemer, for all the scheming, plainly, was the Duke's, a great man pursuing a reluctant poor governess, with a single-minded devotion that scandalized and then delighted the county. And the story that spread was not the one Jane had feared. Not governess advertises her way to a coronet. but the one the Duke made sure of, that a motherless child had advertised for a mother, and a good governess had come 100 miles for the child's sake, and refused the Duke, and the smitten Duke had chased her all winter until she consented. It was a far better story, and it was true, and it became one of the county's favorites, told and retold, always ending with the triumphant detail that the whole thing had been arranged by an 8-year-old with a newspaper advertisement. The Duke's aunt, who had spent 2 years sending eligible ladies to Wexford Court and having every one of them refused, was at first appalled that her nephew meant to marry a governess who had come in answer to a child's mad advertisement and arrived prepared to prevent it. But she had not reckoned with Jane, or with Beatrice, or with the sight of her nephew smiling for the first time in 2 years. And she was, whatever her faults, not a woman who could look at a family so plainly healed and go on objecting. And she came round, grudgingly and then wholeheartedly, and ended by taking enormous credit for the match herself, on the grounds that she had been the one sending ladies to Wexford Court all along, and had merely, in a sense, sent the wrong ones until the right one arrived, a version of events that was entirely false and that no one troubled to correct, because it made the old woman happy and harmed no one. And the marriage was, by every account, exactly the warm thing the advertisement had asked for. Jane Alcott became the mother Beatrice had advertised for, and the wife the sad papa had needed. And she filled the cold, grieving house with warmth and books and laughter, and the Duke of Wexford smiled and smiled and smiled, years of smiles, to make up for the 2 years of none, and Beatrice grew up warm and loved and insufferably proud of having arranged the whole thing herself, which she reminded everyone of at every opportunity for the rest of her life. "She advertised for you," the Duke said to his wife, years on, watching a grown Beatrice, married now herself, and happy, laughing across the room, in a newspaper, for all of England to read. A wife for a duke and a mother for a little girl. I was so mortified when I found out, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I have my meddling 8-year-old to thank for the whole of my happiness, which she will never, ever let me forget. She reached out, Jane said, in the only way an 8-year-old could, a mad, brave advertisement in a newspaper, because she could not bear her papa's sadness and did not know what else to do. And I answered it, because I could not bear a lonely child's cry, and came 100 miles on the strength of it. 2 lonely people reaching for each other across a newspaper advertisement. A child who wanted her papa to smile, and a governess who could not leave a sad child unattended. That is how our whole family began. It should never have worked. It was absurd. And it gave me everything I have ever wanted and never dreamed I would have. A child to love, a husband to love, a home. So I will tell you what I think, Julian. When people say Beatrice's advertisement was a foolish thing, I think a lonely heart reaching out, however foolishly, however publicly, however absurdly, is the least foolish thing in the world. Because sometimes, just sometimes, someone hears it and comes, and everything is changed. Beatrice reached out, I heard, and here we all are. I would not change one word of that absurd advertisement. It was the truest thing ever printed in a newspaper, and it brought me home.